however, did not await the turning of the wheels of justice. Mr. Chairman, my heart goes out to those injured physically and or economically due to the blast, and of course to those who lost loved ones, as well as to the family of the individual still missing. I hope my questions will be answered during this hearing. I also hope to learn what this case means for the future, and finally to reiterate to those listening the assurance that Congress will act to prevent and punish severely and swiftly acts of violence by enemies, whether they be domestic or foreign. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sensenbrenner. Mr. Edwards?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I add my congratulations to the FBI and the police agencies involved in this case. And Mr. Sensenbrenner and Mr. Schumer are both former members of the subcommittee that I've chaired for many years, which has jurisdiction over the FBI and their work on terrorism, against terrorism, national and international. And we also have the jurisdiction of the old House Un-American Activity Committee on alleged subversive activities. So we have worked very closely with the Bureau on in their work on counterterrorism for many years. The record of the FBI in counterterrorism has been remarkable. There's only been one incident of international terrorism in the United States since 1983. Over a 5-year period, 1987 to 1991, the FBI prevented 24 terrorism incidents before they could even get started. That's an extraordinary record and is the product of skillful and hard work by the FBI. The FBI fulfills its counterterrorism duties pursuant to very strict guidelines. Some are classified. These guidelines balance the security interests of the United States with the constitutional rights of the people and of a free society. I would urge my colleagues to question the argument that our open society leaves us vulnerable to terrorism. To the contrary, our democratic processes, tolerance for diversity, and commitment to opportunity leave no fertile ground for terrorism to flourish. I'm concerned that if the New York incident is hyped up, if it is used to encourage hysteria or fear, then indeed our liberties can be imperiled. Nobody in this country should be investigated, must not be investigated because of their religion, race, or place of birth. To a limited extent, but still unfortunate extent, this did happen during the Gulf War. Many loyal Americans of Arab descent were harassed not only by certain members of the public, but by federal and state police agencies. This must not happen because of the New York bombing. I would also hope that all of us involved in the issues be prudent and responsible in our public statements. Inexcusable leaks in this case have already damaged the ongoing investigation. It would have been better if certain details about the FBI techniques used had not been made public. Unproven speculations about the possible involvement of foreign governments should wait for proof. The world should be clear, everybody should be clear, as my chairman made clear, that the FBI will solve this bombing. It might take a while, and those of us in Congress must take the leadership role in urging patience. But those responsible will be identified. The necessary laws and intelligence mechanisms are very much in place to protect this nation from terrorism. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards, and I think our entire committee shares your admonitions and views. Mr. Mazzola, no, Mr. Schiff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for holding this hearing. If I'm correct, this is the first hearing the Congress has held specifically on this bombing incident in New York. It provides a forum for the public to see and hear the witnesses as we see and hear them and learn about this tragic situation as much as can be learned about this time. Certainly, in addition to the seriousness of any crime, a terrorist act or possible terrorist act has a special concern and threat for the American people. I just want to briefly echo two concerns that I've already heard from my colleagues, Mr. Sensenbrenner and Mr. Edwards. First, At the time this hearing was first scheduled, there were no publicly known suspects, and now there are. There are individuals now in custody. And speaking for myself, and I trust endorsed by the chairman, I would certainly ask the witnesses that if they're asked a question, the answer to which they feel would prejudice the future trial of this matter, my encouragement would be for them not to answer the question on those particular grounds, and I think we would understand. Second of all, I want to express the concern expressed by Mr. Edwards. I've seen members of the Muslim community in the United States, particularly Muslims of Arab descent, express great concern because of the public discussion of possible radical fundamentalist involvement. And it should be emphasized that even if that involvement is proven at some future time in court, that the radical sect that advocates violence among this group is not representative of the mainstream group of Muslim believers in this country or elsewhere. And I would share the caution that one irrational act not be followed by other irrational acts around the country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Mr. Mazzoli. Mr. Nadler, by the way, is not a member of the subcommittee, but has asked to sit in on the hearing because the World Trade Center is in his area, and
thank you.
we welcome that.
Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief, and I thank you very much for having called these hearings. They should be very helpful to us in trying to ferret out not only what went on from the standpoint of how this terrible situation could have occurred, but I think the gentleman in his opening statement touched on a number of bills that he and I have worked on in the past in the immigration field that could very well get additional impetus and momentum as a result of this hearing and as a result of these factors. I think it ought to be borne in mind, as our chairman has counseled us, and that is that the self-same laws that may have permitted individuals, perhaps related to this case, to stay on in this country for longer periods of time, to perhaps preach venomous comments and preach hatred, are the very self-same rules that allow people of modest means and of no inclination in those directions to have their cases for asylum looked at carefully and examined with great deliberation. So we have to be careful, obviously, as the chairman has counseled us, not to go too far in any direction because of our understandable disgust at what happened from the human toil and from the economic standpoint, and also from the situation of the fear that this might somehow inculcate in the American people. But within that context of not going too far, I think the gentleman and I and others in our committees can work together and fashion a series of bills that I think will be helpful. So I appreciate the gentleman's hearings and look forward to working with him.
And I want to thank him for all his help in the legislation that we moved through his committee and to the floor last year. Maybe this year we can get it done. Mr. Glickman, who has in the process of just finishing up some oral surgery and was made every effort to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to make a statement this morning regarding the recent events at the World Trade Center. Clearly, the bombing has shed a new light on the law enforcement and crime prevention in the United States. The law enforcement officials, and particularly the FBI and the New York City Police Department, who have worked on this case, have so far done an excellent job in finding the needle in the haystack. But the fact that the needle was ever placed there is a concern to us all. All of us are feeling a bit more vulnerable since this bombing, and I'm glad to know that we are getting right to work to find out how and why this could have happened. This bombing has implications for our intelligence community. As chairman of the Intelligence Committee, I am holding an Intelligence Committee hearing this afternoon with Director Woolsey to generally discuss the future of the agency, and this incident will be discussed there as well. I am disturbed by the ease with which this crime was committed and the potential for mass disaster that was just barely averted. It demonstrates the crucial need for effective international intelligence in this changing post-Cold War era. Our intelligence community must monitor the myriad of terrorist groups that may perpetrate violence within our borders or against our citizens. Unfortunately, despite the end of the Cold War, it appears that the list of groups dissatisfied with some U.S. policy is growing, not shrinking, and the vigor and intensity of their opposition may convert traditionally overseas activities into domestic acts of violence. We live in a complex and sometimes confused world. This is only one example of the dangers we live with every day. In addition to effective domestic law enforcement by the FBI and local and state police, let's use all the intelligence resources at our disposal to make certain that this kind of terroristic act does not happen again. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Glickman. we look forward to working with you as not only as a member of this subcommittee, but as Chairman of Intelligence on the areas you brought up. Mr. Sangmeister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak and for holding this timely hearing. You have done a good job, in my opinion, of preparing at a very short notice a hearing on an issue that may have been overlooked far too long. The bombing of the World Trade Center just over a week ago refocused America's attention on an issue which we have, for the most part, been able to ignore because it always seemed to have happened somewhere else, but not this time. This car bomb went off on our own shores, where we have been lulled into believing things like this do not happen. While many questions still remain unanswered, it appears terrorism has come to America. As we all agree, the prospect that it may happen again is certainly chilling. The Trade Center bombing points out many issues which this subcommittee and full committee must address. First and most importantly, are we safe here in America? Traditionally, terrorism happens in other countries, not here. But now it is New York. We are used to metal detectors and police dogs here on Capitol Hill, but not elsewhere, not in Chicago or Houston or New York. It will not be acceptable for Americans to be forced to live with the fear that any car or truck could be a bomb or that any stranger could be a terrorist. Of course, our immigration policies must be examined. Mohammed Salameh, the first man arrested for this crime, came to the United States in 1987 with a 5-year visa and has been living here illegally since it expired last year. Worst, his alleged mentor, Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman, was able to enter the U.S. even though he was on a government watch list of people who should not be given visas. Mr. Chairman, it appears your long-standing concern with the ability of illegal aliens to arrive at JFK International Airport and then disappear into the city because the INS does not have the facilities to detain or deport them needs to be addressed. Even the press has become involved. New York Newsday apparently forced the FBI to arrest Salameh prematurely by deciding to run a story that would have tipped him off that the FBI knew about the rental truck that carried the bomb. We can only guess how much shorter and fruitful this investigation could have been if the FBI had been able to trail him for several days as they had originally planned. Speaking of which, I would like to congratulate the FBI, the New York City Police Department, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms on their early success in this investigation. Good police work and good luck have given you a decided advantage in solving this crime. I hope you keep the momentum going and will have all of the people involved in this attack incarcerated as soon as possible. This country and this Congress spend a great deal of time trying to balance individual freedoms with the needs of civil society. This one bomb has now upset that balance on issues from immigration to freedom of the press, speech, and religion. Most importantly, I fear the people we are here to work for no longer feel as secure as they once did. It will be very difficult to restore this balance and, more importantly, to ensure that Americans once again feel safe here at home. And that, I believe, is the most important job before us. And I look forward to working with the subcommittee and the committee to restore that balance and trust. And I'm interested in hearing from the witnesses before us on how that may be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sangmeister. Mr. Smith, would you like to make an opening statement?
Is this on? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll add my thanks to the individuals who have preceded me today as far as the effort you're making to bring this subject to the attention of so many people. Obviously, there's a lot of interest, a lot of public interest in this particular terrorist action that occurred in New York. A couple of comments. First of all, I want to give a special welcome to a longtime friend from San Antonio who's done such an outstanding job in bringing this terrorist into the hands of the law enforcement officials, and that's Bill Sessions. I started to say judge, I should say director, and appreciate his presence here very, very much. The other point I want to make, Mr. Chairman, is that we can give a lot of time and a lot of words to this terrorist action, but unless we come up with specific suggestions as to how to prevent this in the future, this committee, in my judgment, will not have really done its job. And I'm particularly interested, and I know you are too, both because of what you've said publicly and because of legislation that you've introduced, in preventing individuals from coming into this country who should not be admitted to this country. And we have a situation in New York, particularly at JFK International Airport, where all you have to do is arrive in New York and you're in this country, whether you're a terrorist or some other type of individual that should not be admitted. And in fact, the individual thought to have been responsible for this bombing should not have been in this country. And I think part of the solution is going to come down to better enforcing our immigration laws and giving the INS the
personnel and the money they need to enforce the laws that are already in effect. We'll find out as a result of today's hearing whether we need more federal laws or not. My guess is we simply need to enforce better the laws that we